Hey guys, it's Ghosdee. Welcome to the channel if you're watching, and welcome to the pod if you're listening. In this episode, we'll be talking about King of Horror, Stephen King, and some of my favorite films that were adapted from his novels. I wanted to make this month Stephen King month because I have memories of watching Stephen King a lot around this time of the year, and also I started reading it around this time of the year back in 2018, and in my head April is just reserved for Stephen King, so here we are. I would say that King of Horror is a fitting title, and King is also a fitting last name for a man whose wide imagination has been scaring the minds of horror fiends and mainstream audiences for 5 decades. His first novel came out in 1974, being Carrie, that was later adapted into a film in 1976, 2 years later, which I think is a fast turnaround. I'm not a novelist, I'm not in that industry, but I feel like for someone who is a novice novelist, 2 years to get a movie deal, it's really fast. King's horror dominated the horror scene throughout the 80s, 90s, even now, which contributes to him being labeled as the King of Horror. He was my personal introduction to horror, Cujo being my first film I watched when I was 3 years old, thanks to my grandparents. His career is still ongoing. His most recent novel being released last year, Holly, and his most recent film adaptation being Dr. Sleep, released in 2019. So without further ado, here is my list of my favorites Stephen King film adaptations that were made by his novels. That is a mouthful, but that's the list that I came up with. We are starting from my bottom to the top. None of these movies are bad. I just think that some of these movies are better than the other ones. And that's just my opinion! I've never watched that, but I do know that meme. Every 27 years, an unknown evil creep from the sewers to the surface to prey on the town's children. Meanwhile, a group of misfits band together over the course of one horrifying summer to face their personal fears and send it back to the sewers for good. This was really hard to put this on the list because truthfully, I think that the It miniseries that came out in 1990 is better, given that Tim Curry is the better Pennywise. Tim Curry is the better Pennywise. That's just how I feel. He just does it better. And also I respect and appreciate that in their original miniseries they feature Mike's character more. I just think that's great. But oh, this was so hard. This was honestly so hard. I think that the movie that came out is just effectively scarier. I just enjoy it more as a whole. Revisiting this for this list, there's a reason why this is 6. A lot of that being because I'm not a fan of the CGI. It's a lot of it is just not working for me anymore. Back then it was working for me. These days it just doesn't. But I do love this group of misfits, which I noticed is a Stephen King trope. He's written a couple of stories of a group of preteens coming together and doing shit over a summer. Like, is this Stand By Me? No, but it could be. And the coming of age, the themes of coming of age as well, which I feel like is a theme that Stephen King loves writing or explores often rather. I will say this is one of the best opening scenes kills in any horror film ever. I read it after this movie came out. The fear of reading that opening scene was captured very much so in this movie. Better in the miniseries. This isn't to compare the two, but as I was creating this list, I was comparing the two a lot because I felt like, oh, maybe I should put them both on here. No, I can't put both. It doesn't make sense to put both. No, I don't want to put both. No, I'm gonna put this one, opening scene. It really did come down to this opening scene, but I also do fucking hate that Mike is a non-character. He's more of a character in the novel. It's crazy they don't do that in this movie, because in the miniseries he is literally one of the main characters. I lost so much respect when I realized after I read the book how much of a character, like how much of a main character Mike is. It's his story. It's his story. He's the narrator, and they made it all about Bill. And they made the miniseries kind of about Bill too, but I think they featured Tim Reed more, which we'll give it credit. Overall, it's still a great Stephen King film. It is one of the highest grossing recent films, something or fucking another, I don't know. But I do know that it did really well at the box office. I would say it's probably part of this current wave of horror coming back into the mainstream and people getting into it, because I know so many people who aren't necessarily actively seeking out horror who saw this movie and love this movie. It's on the list of one of their most scariest movies. Struggling with alcoholism, Dan Torrance remains traumatized by the terrifying events that occurred at the Overlook Hotel when he was a kid. Just when Dan begins to overcome his struggles, he meets Abra, a teen who is also a Shiner, an extraordinary one at that. Together they form an unlikely alliance to battle the True Knot cult, led by the sinister Rose the Hat, and comprised of members who feed off the shine of innocence to become immortal. Flanagan is the king of King. He has the eye for it. I don't quite understand it yet, but I just know that when I'm watching a Flanagan adaptation of a Stephen King theme, it's so spot on. After spending a month diving into Stephen King, I've noticed that he understands the Stephen King ghost. I don't know how else to put it, but his ghost, the way he films them, staged them, even the way that they look, is what you'd expect when reading a Stephen King ghost. Flanagan also understands deeply the heavy themes that Stephen King likes to explore. I think they're just on the same wavelength when it comes to horror, like they're just there. All the characters in Dr. Sleep are amazing. Abra is great. It's nice to see Dan grown up, but I really love Rose. She's a great villain, and I want to say that Stephen King knows how to write the bad guy. He knows how to write a great villain. Rose is this nasty, mean-spirited Shiner. Awful, disgusting cult leader, leading people into stealing the lives of others, stealing the souls of others for their own personal strength and gain. But also I'm watching it and I'm smiling and I'm like, damn, that's fucking sick. No, I'm not saying I would ever be under the influence of a cult, but damn, that's fucking sick. I don't know the actress's name, but it's her body language and the way she brings Rose's character to life. I've yet to read Dr. Sleep, and I'm very interested in to see how this character is written as compared to how it was played. Overall, Dr. Sleep is a great watch. It's a very grounded piece of horror. It's a bit magnificent to see that this film came out so many years after The Shining and also was made by somebody completely different, but also fits into that world so well in a way that I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, because it feels like it was like made by the same person. But that just goes to show how well Mike Flanagan gets Stephen King. So Mike Flanagan for Stephen King forever. Louis Creed moves his wife, daughter, and toddler son to a small town in Maine, across from local Judd and next to a highway where truck drivers notoriously drive recklessly. After the Creed's cat is accidentally killed, Crandall takes Louis to bury it in the ground near the old pet cemetery. The cat returns to life, but it's not the same cat. When Louis's son, Gage, dies tragically, he decides to bury the boy's body in the same ground, despite the warnings of the Crandalls and Louis's visions of a deceased patient. Pet Cemetery is one that I really, really love, and every time I rewatch it, I'm like, wow, this is still great. Okay, it's just really dark. It's dark, and I've read this one. Not a huge fan of the novel. Not that it's bad, it's just really hard for me to read through Louis's perspective. We spend most of the time with him, and it's just like the whole time you want to be like, dude, stop. But it really puts you in his mind of his irrational thinking. Nothing against the book itself. There are so many great scenes in this. Judd's death, his Achilles heel being fucking sliced, when Gage dies, the acting, oh my god, it's like you're watching that and you feel the fucking pain. Even now thinking about it, I'm like, shit. Gage coming back to life, it's almost comical and morbid. I don't know if his lines were scripted or if his lines were ad-lib because he's a smaller child and maybe he was just saying that. He says no fair, trying to play, but his version of playing is killing people. And the ending is so bleak. It's so bleak. Lewis goes on to bury his wife after his dead son came back, killed everybody, including his wife. Buries his wife, and that's just where the movie ends. But I think that when it comes to the representation of dealing with grief, coping with grief in general, I can empathize with just wanting that person to come back. I would admit myself to the hospital before taking any action to bringing them back as an adult. You know, as a child, as like Lindsay Lohan and fucking Life Size, maybe I would be 11 years old doing some voodoo magic to make my fucking parent come back to life. But as an adult, I was like, all right, we need to accept this person is dead. Let's go to a psych ward. We're not gonna try to make them come to life. We don't need to be fucking with that shit. We don't need to be fucking with that shit. Famous romance novelist Paul Sheldon just wrapped up his most recent book when he is caught in a winter storm that nearly takes his life. He is saved by self-claimed biggest fan Annie Wilkes, an ex-nurse who brings him back to her remote cabin to nurse him back to recovery. Granted his blessing, Annie reads his new novel and learns that her favorite character from his novel is killed off. Her off-putting obsession then grows into rage, trapping him there even longer. This is a Stephen King film/novel that doesn't rely on any supernatural force. Misery doesn't have any of that. This is straight real with a real monster. Kathy Bates. Second she's on screen, you know you can't trust her. You don't know why, but you know you can't trust her. And it's so uneasy every second. She's just weird. She's just fucking weird. And it unravels as the story goes. She gets weirder and weirder, and then you're like, actually, will he live? She's more than just weird. She's psycho. I am a fan of claustrophobic horror. I'm a fan of Locked in the Cabin. It's winter. Ooh, what's going on? Watching this film for this list was actually the first time I've watched Misery in its entirety. And I was entirely blown away. Even though I knew how it ended, I still felt the tension and the horror throughout the film. When typically sweet Saint Bernard Cujo is bitten by a bat, he starts behaving oddly and becomes very aggressive. As Cujo becomes more violent, locals begin to die. Meanwhile, lonely mother and wife Donna is facing marital issues and car problems that lead her to raging Cujo's pit, locking her and her son in one hot car for too long. Now, I know I was talking about Kathy Bates as a great villain in Misery, and I stand by that, but Cujo might actually be the scariest villain in my opinion. I don't know, maybe I'm just like scarred because this is the first horror movie and I was a child, literally I was 3 years old, and I remember being terrified after watching this. But every time I watch this, I'm just like, this is scary. Not only are they like trapped because there's this dog, but it's fucking hot outside and they don't have food and they don't have water. Like, this isn't just a test of can I survive this dog, it's can I survive the fucking elements. Movie fucking hits. All of that feeling is intensified by this directing. Louis Teague. I got to watch a little bit of BTS for this before I got into recording this, and I learned quite a bit about the making of Cujo, and I learned that the director is actually quite passionate about this piece, and it's telling. The dude knows he's shit. There's two scenes that come to mind in particular. The scene where the child is running from his bed to turn off the light at the end of the night, and he's scared of the monsters in his closet. He turns off the light and is like running to the bed, and the way that they shot it makes it look like he's running so far from the light to the bed. And we all know as kids, oh, I'm getting flashbacks. When you're afraid of the dark, that run from the light switch to the bed after you turn off the light, it's like a mile. It's like a fucking mile. That scene and the scene where they're in the car and it's a rotating camera shot and we see Dee Wallace. Amazing acting, by the way. Dee Wallace and the child actor, Danny, don't know his last name. That scene though, terrifying, dizzying, all of the above. I think that Cujo doesn't get as much love as it deserves. I question if that has to do with the fact that we are made to empathize with a character who is unfaithful to her husband. This character is going through this crisis. She's a wife, she's a mother, she's bored, so she starts having an affair. I think that this is a great movie because at the end of the movie, I think she comes to realize what matters to her, her fucking family, and she has to fight for it, and it's almost like a test to really come to her revelation. 16-year-old Carrie White is taunted by her classmates at school and abused by her mother at home. When strange occurrences start to happen around Carrie, she begins to suspect that she has supernatural powers. Invited to prom by the empathetic Tommy Ross, Carrie tries to let her guard down, but things eventually take a dark and violent turn. Let's talk about Brian De Palma, because this man is actually absolutely amazing when it comes to directing. There's a split screen editing in here. The colors are vibrant and thematically relevant. I've talked about the score on my channel before. Check out the video. One of my favorite scores in anything, period. I can listen to it on repeat all day. I can hear it and see the story. That's great music writing. That's great score. That's great partnership. That's just great everything. That's great filmmaking. Carrie White is simply one of the best protagonists in any film, period. She is this two-sided character, an outcast, very sweet, misunderstood, is curious and is trying to figure out her way, but is also in such an awful environment at home and unfortunately at school, because we don't teach society to be empathetic to people who have shitty home lives, but also kids are fucking shitty, and instead of trying to accept and understand Carrie, they make her more of an outcast, make fun of her, and this creates this rage in Carrie that makes her flips the switch and she gets her fucking revenge, which personally I think is justified. I think that is real. Not burning down a school, not having telekinetic powers and burning down a school, but someone being pushed so much by the people around them, even her own fucking mother. She couldn't trust anyone, to the point to where there's this rage. The people who get it fucking get it, and girly, I get it, and I love Carrie. I love the novel itself. It's easily one of his best novels. Also, the thematic undertones of religion and religion oppression, abuse at the home. Interesting enough, this novel is structured in a way that we would consider like a mockumentary style, and such that there are parts of the book where we're ripped from Carrie's narrative and we're checking in with the students that experience it and are explaining what happened post. And if I'm not mistaken, it's written like tapes, like recorded tapes with detectives. I was so fucking into that. It's a short read. It's like less than 200 pages. It's a feminist classic. It is. This woman gets her period and she's powerful. She has a power. Her mom, the Christian rhetoric was so heavy that she was afraid to tell her daughter of her period and treat it as a sin. Ugh. God, so deep. There's so much. I love Carrie. That's all I have for this episode, guys. If there are any Stephen King movies, TV shows, anything that you love, feel free to comment them. Feel free to DM me, share them. I don't know, just let me know. Share, I want to know. Let's talk about Stephen King this month. Next week, I will be back, or no, JK, I don't release videos every week. Not yet. In a few weeks, I'll be back talking about another Stephen King thing, moving away from his novels, looking at his scripts. Until then, keep up with me on social media. I'm on Instagram at Ghosdee, Twitter at Ghosdee_, and Letterboxd at Ghosdee. I will chat with you guys in the next episode.